welcome to the Bruce Channel. I'm Bruce. I'm also glad that you're here with us. It's the last day of May, the 31st, and we've got a lot to look at today, but we'll start with a look back. If today is the 31st, yesterday is the 30th, which means yesterday was the real Memorial Day. Yeah, I know, last weekend was the 3-day weekend, but it used to just be the 30th. And like Independence Day, the 4th of July, which is hard to move that one, you know, but Memorial Day came when it came, on the 30th. It was midweek. Sometimes it was the end of the week. If it was midweek, it was like finding a $20 bill in the pocket of a jacket you hadn't worn in some time. I know why it moved to a Monday. I don't have a real quarrel with that, but I do have a slight quarrel with it being treated as though it's Veterans Day. Veterans Day is November 11th. That's when we honor and salute and give thanks to everyone who's ever donned a uniform, but Memorial Day is different. It's when we honor those who gave the last full measure of their devotion, that is, they gave their lives. Anyway, fewer of us all the time, but some of us still remember when it was known as Decoration Day. And it started as just that, decorating the graves of those who died in the Civil War. My mother called it Decoration Day. In fact, it wasn't until 1967 that the name was officially changed to Memorial Day. Anyway, whatever you call it, I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you reflected on its true meaning. The last page of Time magazine often features someone of note who answers 10 questions. That's what it's cleverly called, 10 questions. Well, in the April 20th issue, about a month and a half ago, it was Brian Glazer. Now, if you don't know who he is, you certainly know of his work. His partner is Oscar-winning director Ron Howard. Brian's the business guy, Ron's the artist. Now, up in the corner, there's a little picture here. The two of them, when they received the Oscar for Best Picture for A Beautiful Mind, which starred Russell Crowe. Now, The Beautiful Mind belonged to mathematician, outstanding mathematician, John Forbes Nash Jr., who in 1994 won a Nobel Prize in Economic Sciences. This year he was honored as the 2015 winner for the Abel Prize, which is awarded by the government of Norway to a mathematician, or a group of mathematicians. He's one of those guys who thinks in ways I can't even conceive of. Anyway, the reason they made a movie about him was not only because he is a genius, but because he suffered for years from paranoid schizophrenia, beginning in the late 50s. And then sometime in the mid-80s, the treatment had finally caught up, years of treatment, and it got him to the point of being able to resume a normal life. And I bring all this up because sometimes life is quirky, it's strange, it's unpredictable, certainly. It can be ironic. John Forbes Nash and his wife Alicia were riding in a taxi 2 Saturdays ago, a week from yesterday, May 23rd. They were returning home from the Newark airport. They were returning from Norway, where he accepted the Abel Prize. The cabbie lost control of the car. They hit a concrete median. Nash and his wife were both ejected and killed. Certain cliches come to mind. Tomorrow is promised to no one, and gather ye rosebuds while ye may. So California's having a drought of biblical proportions, and it's several years running. This isn't new, and it's forced Governor Jerry Brown to implement the most severe water curtailment measures ever. Now, doubtless you've seen how high beef prices have been, and that's because for several years much of Texas has been in a severe drought. Severe, severe, severe. Nothing for the cattle to graze on. And the feed prices have gone off the charts, so cattlemen winnowed the herd. They had smaller herds. They sold what they had. They did not replace, and now there's less beef, supply and demand. And of course, the more recent Texas weather has been the flooding. No rain, too much rain. And we've seen pictures like this in coastal Texas when a hurricane hits, but this was not a hurricane, just torrential rain, non-stop rain, over 11 inches of rain. So now there's flooding, millions of dollars in damages, and of course fatalities. So I mentioned the higher beef prices. Leave it to Walmart. Like them or not, they are the country's largest grocer. Among their offerings are frozen beef patties. Virtually every chain sells something similar. 70% lean, 80%, 90%. And they always look like this. Now the yellow, blue, or red designation delineates how lean it is. And depending on which lean percentage you chose, they were around $10, $11 or so. Within the last month, although the colors and other packaging looks almost the same, and the price doesn't seem to have changed much, $9, $10-ish, that 12 has changed to an 8. That's an old trick. Coffee and cereals have done that for a long time, and apparently we fall for it, or it wouldn't be standard procedure. Okay, speaking of drought, I am once again worried about how dry it is here. Since I moved to this address 10 years ago, I can remember only one summer when we seemed to get the amount of rain I remember as being normal when I first moved to North Carolina. Now, through spring and summer, there would always be plenty of thunderstorms, especially in spring, of course. I remember more than one athletic director telling me back when I was covering sports that he hated spring sports. They were the worst. Not the sports themselves, but the logistics of getting them played. Baseball, softball, track, golf, they're all played outside. And of course, the ADs would be forever calling each other, trying to reschedule because of the clashing air masses that occur in spring. But I also remember through the summer, we'd get 1 or 2 afternoon thunderstorms every week. This is a lot like Florida. Not everyday clockwork like Florida, but it was the big humidity and the daytime heating, popcorn showers they're called, because if you watch a radar map around 3:30 in the afternoon, they just pop up like popcorn. But in the last 10 years or so, I remember only one summer with plenty of rain. It was 2 summers ago. And I'm pretty sure it wasn't a coincidence that there were so many butterflies that year. And it wasn't just me. You could be in a parking lot anywhere, and if you saw a butterfly, you could speak to the person next to you. It could be a stranger, and you could say, "Doesn't it seem as though we have a lot of butterflies this year?" And everyone would agree. We all noticed. It was universally topical. Well, this year, as we head into June, we're already 4 inches below average, and that's, right here in what's supposed to be our wettest season, spring. So it just doesn't bode well. And statistics can be misleading. 3, maybe 4 years ago, it was dry, 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 dry. My garden was terrible. Squash, tomatoes, everything was terrible. Farmers especially were hit hard. But you know what? We ended the year with a surplus, according to the numbers. We had an enormously wet October, which was completely worthless vis-a-vis the growing season. Remember, you can write us at the Bruce Channel at yahoo.com. You can view all the previous shows at either our Facebook page, The Bruce, one word, The Bruce Channel, or at tinyurl.com/Bruce Channel. Okay, so this is no longer hot off the presses, but I hear that American Idol has been canceled, ending, I think, after one last season next year. To that I say, good riddance. Be gone. I've never watched one episode. Ever, ever. I know it's popular. And I know it changed television landscape. And I know, too, that some very talented individuals have been winners and they've gone on to do well, and that's all fine. Here's why I don't watch it. In its early days, I did see some promos, and I was early and forever off-put by the humiliating way some of them were treated. First of all, I don't believe that the vicious way the Simon guy spoke to the less than terrific performance is warranted ever under any circumstances. Everybody on this planet has some insecurity. And if the singer isn't a good singer, fine, say, keep your day job. Instead, he would insult, but even that is not the crux of it. Over the years, you have seen or read the stories in the news. This city or that city, usually 3 every season, they would have auditions. And at each one, television news cameras would get the shots. Thousands of kids? The line was forever and a day? So how is it even possible that out of all of these candidates, some of the bad singers were even allowed to get on the show? Simple. They were selected to get on the show simply because they were so bad. Which means, from the very onset, the show's intent was to make fun of them in front of millions, to take their humanity and change it to farce, to show the world their inadequacy in singing, and we all have some inadequacies, don't we? In something. And flay them alive, insult them, humiliate them, which they called entertainment. Making a sport of a sentient being's misery. I don't see much difference between that and bullfighting. Hey, let me tell you about my book, Shrink. Or wait, I can let others do it. All right, in our inaugural show just before Thanksgiving, I told you I had written Jeff Gauger, who is the publisher of the Greensboro News and Record. At the time, I'd taken some issue with the papers wishing to charge me an extra $2 for the Thanksgiving paper, heavily laden as it was with lots of advertising circulars promoting the next day's sales, Black Friday, and I didn't want to pay for that. But all right, so he didn't waive the fee. That's okay. I know he saw that episode, and I've actually corresponded with him. There's no rancor, there's no umbrage held either way. Now, like many of you, I get my news from a lot of sources. Newspaper, on the air, online. Newspapers are at a real disadvantage because, once you print it, there's no more paper to print until tomorrow, which is why they have web presences. Certainly the days of extra, read all about it, Germany surrenders, read all about it, those days are gone. Newspapers are hurting. The millage is thinner. I don't know that that's true. It sure feels thinner. And we know that they're narrower. So, inside there is now so little news, though. It used to take a half hour, routinely a half hour to read the paper. Now it's 10, 15 minutes. Even on Sunday it doesn't take so long. And no TV station or online website can replicate the ambiance of hot coffee and a newspaper spread out on the table in front, which is one of the reasons I want newspapers to succeed. So I'm reaching out again to Mr. Gauger. The Greensboro News and Record is part of a group of papers owned by Warren Buffett's company, Berkshire Hathaway. And there are probably a lot of things he can't control. So in an effort to reduce costs, many newspapers have been centralized, maybe one sports editor or maybe for the region. There's fewer writers, there are fewer articles, which is why it doesn't take so long to read. But even of them, many have just dropped in from the AP, and that's always been the norm for small-town papers whose primary coverage is the local thing, and they drop in a few AP stories. But Greensboro is a large enough city so that if you say, where am I from? Greensboro. You don't have to say North Carolina. People know that. Yeah, I know there's some people who don't even know where North Carolina is. They can't tell the difference between North Carolina and North Dakota or find it on the map, but that's a different issue. It is a city large enough, it should have a paper that more resembles a metropolitan than a small-town paper. So it is disappointing that it isn't larger and more robust. But I understand you do with what you can. But if your product isn't all it can be, that's not exactly right. Maybe it is all it can be, but maybe it's not all it should be, and that's the financial reality. Okay. But if it still can't be that, then customer service ought to be terrific. So what's the story here? All right, for decades I have played the daily jumble. It was a daily ritual I shared with my dad. He'd play it, I'd play it. Occasionally, if the pun was oblique or if it was otherwise difficult, we'd call each other, did you get it? Did you get it? Now, a few years after my dad's passing, I had quit playing it entirely. It just didn't feel right. But I begun again. Now, if you don't play, it works like this. Monday through Saturday, the answer appears in tomorrow's paper. But Sunday has a different format. It has 6 words instead of 4, and because of that, and likely because everywhere some people only subscribe to their paper on Sunday, the answer appears the same day. All right, so like nearly everyone else, I read the paper left to right. I sort according to the section, and then I read the first page, and I turn the page, and then I go there, and there, and there, and there, right? That's what most people do. I peruse, I choose those things that interest me, I ignore that which doesn't. So about 2 months ago, on Sunday, I'm angered. I see the puzzle answers, and I haven't got to the puzzle yet. Fortunately, I was able to avert my eyes and not see the answers, but they were fully a page or 2 or 3 in front of the jumble itself, which was on the section's last page, much as this one is. But the section's composing editor, maybe that person doesn't play the jumble, hadn't given it any thought. Okay, that could happen. And this was not worthy of Mr. Gauger's pay grade, so I never meant to include him in the conversation. I located the contact info, chose what seemed to be the most appropriate email address, began with, "Please forward this to the composing editor for the Sunday Living section." Then I explained my problem, that there's an obvious danger of revealing the answer to jumble aficionados before they play the game. I explained that I was sure composing pages is a difficult task. I know I couldn't do it. It reminds me of a jigsaw puzzle, and I can't do jigsaw puzzles. You know the little 5-piece jigsaw puzzles you do in kindergarten? I can't do those either. Anyway, if that was the reason, if the answers had to be printed on an earlier page, flip it. Print those upside down. Make it so that a casual glance wouldn't compromise the puzzle. Nada. It's been a couple months now, and in all of that time, Sundays come, and most of the time the answers have been advance of the puzzle. Maybe 1 or 2 exceptions, and when they were in advance, they were not printed upside down. What's frustrating isn't that my idea wasn't accepted. It's not that I have the ego, here's a solution, use it. It's even though it is an obvious need and seems to be a very easy solution to implement. No, what's most frustrating is being ignored. There was no response at all. No friendly, well, gee, thanks for your interest. We'll take it under advisement. I said, last week? Week before? I've lived in like 5 cities. 9 cities, 5 states. I've gotten the paper in every single one of them. The jumble appears in every one of them. It is very popular. Well, as I said, this really isn't worthy of Mr. Gauger's time. And I know he doesn't compose the pages. But maybe he can influence the person who does. I hope so. I've spent more than a few years in customer service. It is my belief that whatever the company, whatever the product, sometimes there are mistakes. Sometimes it happens. Sometimes the customer's reasonable expectations aren't quite met. That happens. A reasonable person has to accept that. We're human. We're fallible. What makes the difference then is how the company responds when a mistake has been made or doesn't respond. All right, at the beginning of May, in the episode called Bloody Wednesday, I showed you how Mike Larson originally predicted complete financial collapse would occur on Wednesday, January 28th. And I showed you how he then sneaked it into April and then moved it to June. Okay, I'd mentioned too at the time that within a week of that original Black Wednesday, Mike Larson's colleague, Larry Edelson, was predicting instead that the Dow would hit 31,000, maybe 32,000 by 2016. And as I recall, he's written similarly since then. But this past Monday, and that's not even his regular day to write, his day is Wednesday, he now predicts his own version of financial collapse. I just want to ask what happened to the 31,000? And then on his regular day, Wednesday, his regular column, wow, he says the opportunity to make more money than ever was here, but the flip side was here too, the opportunity to lose big money. Aren't you impressed? I am. I mean, what keen insights. You could lose money, you could make money. All right, finally, here's something you don't see very often. Tuesday afternoon, I hear the rotor blades of clearly it was a helicopter. It didn't just pass over. It came back. Then it grew louder and louder. Now, I'm one neighbor removed from a private road that isn't really a road at all. Actually, it's the entrance to a parking lot for a church. The chopper sat down in the parking lot and later took off. I didn't have time to get a really good shot, but anyway, I have no idea what that was about. All right, not to reveal too much, but on upcoming shows, we are going to investigate a very mysterious disappearance. I'm serious. We're going to investigate, I think it's mysterious anyway. We'll also take a look at some of the most silly polling, quote unquote, it's not really a poll, it is BS, to call it anything other than that bestows upon it a dignity which it does not deserve. We're going to do something we haven't done in a while with the movies and the GMO glyphosate controversy taking so much of the time. We're going to visit some music. Wow. Oh, and speaking of movies, I'm going to be working on a picture in Charlotte at the end of this week. So that will have to wait for a couple more shows before we get to it. Anyway, lots of stuff going on. As we bid adieu to May and head into June, then I do hope your upcoming week is the best one you've ever had.